Hello, welcome back. We are going to finish Delta, and I'm gonna try and read for more than half an hour today. We'll see how I go. We'll see how I go. We're still on the dictionary section part of the metaphysics, which is kind of annoying. It's kind of weird that, and this is something I've found with a lot of philosophy books or political theory books, is we are 170 pages in, really, and we actually really haven't got to the meat of the book. A lot of the time, the preparatory stuff is so long that, like, the core thesis isn't actually that big a part of the book. I found the opposite thing actually kind of happened with a book I read called Liberty or Equality, where the actual arguments people care about from the book only make up like a third, the first third of the book itself. Anyway, I'm going to stop yapping. Let us continue with these definitions. One, the first definition of one by accident. I'm assuming this is like per accident, or like accident as in if when you have a substance versus an accident where it's like a product. One per se, so just specifically oneness. Examples. Kurisk, I've never seen this word in my life before. I'm just going to pin these so they're out of the way. Coriscus, meaning. This particular soul and this particular body, the individual is analogous to the universal in its composition. I am going to save that. That is a good word. It's a very good word. Okay. Coriscus. And musicality. This and musicality, really. Musical Coriscus, asserting the unity of Coriscus and musicality. This tautologos. This is tautologos, an adjective describing a statement, phrase, or idea that says the same thing twice in different words, creating unnecessary repetition. For example, a free gift. A widow woman are considered tautologous, with asserting the unity of musical Coriscus. Musicality and justice, and musical and just Coriscus. I really don't like this word Coriscus, doesn't really make sense to me. If Coriscus be different from a man, he is different from himself, for he is a man. So it just means like it's sort of like quiddity from Scotus. It's like quiddity, but whatever. These are all said to be one by accident. In the case of justice and musicality, they are accidents of a single substance. In that of musicality and Coriscus, one is an accident of the other. Similarly, in a way with oneness of musical Coriscus and Coriscus, one of the two parts of one of these two conjunctions, viz. musical, is an accident of the other conjunct, viz. Coriscus. And musical Coriscus is one with just Coriscus, because a part of each of the two terms is an accident of the same thing. So I guess what he's saying here is musicality is a sort of oneness, and therefore to say that like a musical oneness is sort of a double. It's a tautology or whatever it was. I don't know about that, but I don't really get the point. But hey, what do I know? And it is pretty much the same if the accident is predicated of a kind of one of the universal words. If, say, it was said that man is the same as musical man, this could either be because musicality is an accident of man, which is a single substance, or because both are accidents of some particular. For example, Coriscus. Of course, they could not both pertain to Coriscus in the same way, rather man presumably would pertain to him as his genius, as his genus, and as intrinsic to his substance, whereas musicality would pertain to him as a state or affection of his substance. Okay, so much for the way in which things are said to be one by accident. Of things that are said to be... Okay, I get what he's saying with the one by accident. Now, it's like when things are the same, not because they are necessarily exact, but because they pertain to the same thing. So they're related, and that relation creates the oneness, is what I'm getting. Now, I don't know if that's the right interpretation, but we'll continue on. Of things said to be one per se, some are so said by dint of being continuous. A faggot is one, though its binding timbers by their glue. A line, too, if continuous, and even if bent, is said to be one, and ditto all bodily parts, such as a leg or arm, and of this group it is rather things continuous by nature than by art that are one. And something is said to be continuous if it has per se a single process and cannot be otherwise, and a process is single if it is indivisible, the indivisibility being temporal. And things are per se continuous unless they are one merely by contact. If you were so to arrange some pieces of wood that they were in contact, I do not suppose that you would be disposed to say that they were one piece of wood, body, or any continuous thing. So quite generally, continuous things are said to be one, even if they are bent, and still more those that do not have bends. So the shin or thigh is more one than the leg, since the process of the leg does not have to be single. Yeah, so what he's saying here, from everything that's been said, is, as far as I can gather, there's something that's, excuse me, there's something that's one by the process of being a composite of things. But you can also break it down further, and that would be the per se continuous, but you can break it down further to the individual parts that will make up the one. So with the case of the shin, that there's one shin in one leg, but it's all one leg, though you might say there's more oneness in the shin or something. Also, the straight line is more one than the bent line. In fact, if a line is bent and has an angle, we say that it is and is not one, since it is possible for its process to be both not simultaneous and simultaneous. That's true, actually. I've never really thought about that. If you have a line that's like a right angle, um, you could say that's two lines connected, or you could say that's one line with a right angle. Whereas the process of the straight line is, in all cases, simultaneous. There is no part of it with magnitude that is in stasis while the other part is in process, as is the case with the bent line. And there is another way in which things are said to be one, and this is that their substance is not differentiated in species, and there is no such differentiation when the species is perceptibly indivisible, and the substrate here is either the primary or the latest relative to the end. On the one hand, wine is said to be one, and water is said to be one, qua indivisible species. But or on the other, sources, for example olive oil, wine, and all smeltable things are said to be one on the grounds that the ultimate substrate of them all is the same. They are all either water or air. Things are also said to be one if their genus is one, though differentiated by opposite differentiae. The reason, yeah, okay, so now he's talking about how you can have something like water, which is one because it's indivisible, and then there's one because it has a universal substrate or a universal essence. So if something has a universal essence, then that in that sense it's oneness, but you can also have something that has a indivisible essence, and that thing is also one. So water is one because the only thing that's in it is water, whereas wine is one because it's all wine. It's not wine and other stuff. If you were to put in spices and heat it up, it would become mulled wine, which would be wine and other ingredients. Things are also said to be one if their genus is one, though differentiated by opposite differentiae. That would be like saying humans are animals. You know, the reason here too, why they are all said to be one, is that the genus underlying the differentiae is one. So horse, dog, and man are one in that they are all animals. Hey, look at that. And this is in fact quite like the way it is with things whose matter is one. Sometimes then this is the basis for saying that these things are one, but sometimes it is that the higher genus is said to be the same if they are the lowest species of their kind. For instance, the isosceles, isosceles and equilateral. I gotta search this up. Isosceles, a triangle having two sides of equal length. I should know this because I actually went to school, but that's okay. You can have a right angle isosceles. Isosceles. There, look at that guy. Two angles of the same length. And yeah, I remember doing all this stuff in school. And you have to figure out, because of these angles, there's 180 degrees inside, so you have to figure out this guy. And if you know these, you can figure out the length of the bottom or something. I forget. Anyway, for instance, the isosceles and equilateral are one and the same figure. So an equilateral triangle is one that all the sides are of equal distance, equal length, are one and the same figure in that they are both triangles, but they are not, of course, the same triangles. And things are also said to be one if the account that states the what it was to be that thing for one of them is indivisible from an account that reveals another of them. I wish he would just say essence. Like, I know the translator, he like acknowledged that essence as a term came later on in time. Like, it was a medieval term that, you know, wasn't around in ancient Greece, but essence as a term to describe what it was to be that thing is just so much more succinct. And things are also said to be one if they have basically a universal nature, if they have the same essence. In this way, even things that are increased or diminished are one because the account of them is one with the account of the form or plane figures. So, triangles that share the same essence, as in having being three lines that are connected and have an internal uh, degree of 180, are all triangles on account of the fact that they are they're all one in the sense that they're all the same for that essence, I guess. Sort of what he was saying before, but I think the difference is with the wine example, it's because they're all ultimately water, but that's which means it's this like they have the same composite, the same core element. More generally, there are things, if there are things such that the thought that thinks the essence for those things is indivisible and cannot separate those things in time, place, or account, these most of all are one, especially those that are substances. For, generally speaking, things that do not involve division are said to be one, just to the extent that they do not involve it. So that, for instance, if things do not involve division qua man, then they are one man. And if they do not, and if not qua animal, then they are one animal. And if not qua magnitude, they are one magnitude. Qua is like such a weird. I always forget it every time I see it. Yeah, in the capacity of as being quay, quay. Right. In the capacity of an animal, the capacity of magnitude. Yeah, okay. I always see it and I always forget it. But yeah, like why is it that he brings in quay, which is a Latin term, but he refuses to say essence or esse for this? I don't know. Either way, I think he actually explained it in the introduction, but I've just forgotten it. So most things are said to be one by dint of their either doing or involving or undergoing or being related to something that is one. But those things that are primarily said to be one are those whose substance is one in continuity, form, or account. Indeed, in counting we treat as plural either those things that are not continuous or whose form is not one or the account of which is not one. Yeah, so this is making a distinction between something that is you might call like essentially he's just reiterating the difference between something being essentially one and accidentally one, I think. So like a thing can be one in the sense that it's, you know, like it's sharing the same universal essence as something else, whereas something can be one in the sense that it is one per se because its its essence is indivisible. Substance is one, and then the 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 thing that is one is more one than the thing that is accidentally one. Now it is true that we say of anything that is a continuous quantity that it is one, but also in a way we do not, unless it be a kind of whole, unless that is it has a single form. Suppose, for instance, we see the parts of a shoe lying higgledy-piggledy about. We would not say that they were one in the same way, only in fact in terms of continuity. If, on the other hand, we saw them so arranged to be a shoe and possessed of a single form, then we would at this point say they were one, which is also why the circle is most fully one of all lines, because it is a complete whole. Yeah, I kind of get what he's saying, but I can't really articulate it myself. If a shoe, if the parts of a thing, if the composite parts of a thing aren't united, then you wouldn't say that there is one shoe because there is no unity of the composite or continuous parts. Whereas when it is united, then it becomes one by dint of its now by it now having continuity. Now the what it was to be that thing of one, the essence of one is a principle of the essence for some number. The primary measure is the principle. Since the primary measure is that by which we primarily have cognition of each kind, and so one is the principle of cognizability for each thing. Yet the one is not the same for all kinds. In one case, for instance, it is the quarter tone. They've bolded the word one in quarter tone. What does this mean? I don't know. It says it is the quarter tone in another the vowel or consonant, and the one for weight and the one for the process are different. In all cases, however, the one is indivisible either in quantity or in form. Yeah, so I get what he's saying here, which is that in order to understand something, you're basically understanding the essence or oneness of that particular thing. So what makes that thing particular, you know? So when you understand what a computer is, you're not understanding it as a composite of many, many things, although it is. You're thinking of it as one computer, and your ability to identify it as one computer is a way of sort of knowing it, I guess, if that makes sense. And something indivisible in quantity if indivisible in all directions and without position is said to be a unit, whereas if divisible in all directions and with position, it is said to be a point. Something divisible in one direction is said to be a line. Something divisible in two directions is said to be a plane, and something that is divisible in all three directions in quantity is said to be a body. Oh my god, he came up with 1D, 2D, and 3D. That's crazy. To put it another way, round, what is divisible in two directions is a plane, what in one direction is a line, and what is not divisible at all in quantity is a point or a unit. A point if with, a unit if without position. Also, some things are numerically one, some formally, some generically, and some by analogy. Those things are numerically one whose matter is one, whose things are formally one whose account is one, and those things are generically one to which the same pattern of predication applies, and those things are one by analogy which are related as some further thing is to some yet further one. And the posterior unites and the posterior unities always accompany the prior ones, so that any things that are numerically are also formally one, whereas not all things that are formally one are numerically one, and any things that are formally one are also generically one, whereas not all things that are generically one are formally one, but are one by analogy, even though not all those things that are one by analogy are generically one. And of course, on accounts of, so what I'm getting here is so you have things that are numerically one, generically, and by analogy. This is, again, it just feels like reiteration at this point, but in this case, the numerically one is the fact that it is it is actually one. And then generically one is when you share a common oneness. So for example, you could say that, you know, uh, men mankind is sort of a one because each man is a man, and because they share that generic um, ability to predicate, you can say it's one man. And then when something's one by analogy, it's when they share one characteristic or attribute. And that's sort of what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting out of it. And of course, accounts of plurality are ranged over against those of unity. Some are based on non-continuity, some on the possession of formally divisible matter, whether primary or final, and some on the obtaining of a plurality of accounts stating the what it was to be that thing. Being, accidental being, per se being. And then he's just going to talk about that. I wonder how many words? Identity, difference, opposite, contrary. Why are some so short? Contrary, formerly other, prior and posterior, potentiality, um, quantity, quality, relation, complete, limit, respect, disposition, habit, having/habit, affection, privation, to have, to possess, to be from something, part, whole, mutilated, kind, false, accident. Okay. Alright. Alright, we get this. I will say this though, like the idea of having a dictionary sort of at the start of your book is really good in my opinion. I like that a lot because I feel like one of the issues with um, a lot of books, especially when you're talking to people who are very distant from you in terms of ideology or belief system, is often you'll use the same word but have very different meanings. So you really do need to like um, explain the definition of your terms very specifically. And this is just like a something to point out, which is that don't arbitrarily change the definition of something if you're debating someone, like, or if you're arguing, um, and there's like a agreed upon definition of something, don't change it. Don't create a new definition for zero reason. Now, if you're describing something like different, then it might be fruitful to have a new definition. But if you're just arbitrarily changing definitions, you're sort of not actually making up new ways of describing something, but rather you're just making the word become a meaningless sound. Anyway, 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 let's get back to it. Accidental being. Examples. We say that a just man is musical, that a man is musical, that a musician is a man. This is exactly similar to that to saying that the musician builds, in that the builder has the accidental feature of being a musician, or, if you prefer, the musician has the accidental feature of being a builder. In this context, to say A is A is B indicates that B is an accidental feature of A. Okay, so for those who don't know, accident in this circumstance doesn't mean unintentional. It means like a product of something rather than part of the substance of being itself. So To give an example, you have an eye. Your eye, the substance of your eye, what it or the essence is like the form of the eye. The accident of the eye is vision, okay? So an eye gives you vision. But if something gives you vision, it's not necessarily an eye. So it's important to make that distinction because some things, the accident of a thing can often be conflated to the definition or the substance of a thing. Accident is the product of a thing. It's the result of a thing. Um, Now, not necessarily. It's not a necessary result, but it's what is considered the result of a thing. And this goes for our cases of being. So when he's saying um, A is an that A is B, that indicates that B is an accidental feature of A. So in the case of if you say, a musician, what is it? The or if you prefer, the musician has the accidental feature of being a builder. If you say the musician is a builder, you're saying that a product of this musician is him being a builder. Like one of the outcomes, so to speak, of him as a being is that he is a builder. Does that make sense? Maybe, maybe not, but I've tried to explain it. And this goes for our cases of being. For when we say that a man is musical, or a musician is a man, or that a white man is a musician, or that the latter is white, what we are saying in the last two cases is that the same thing has both accidental features. Whereas what we are saying in the first two cases is that something that is has an accidental feature. And to say that the musical is a man is to say that musicality is an accidental feature of a man, which is obviously like incorrect. Indeed, in this way, it is also said that the not white has being because the thing of which it is an accidental feature has being. So if A is said to be if A is said to be B, this is said either because both A and B are features of the same thing that has being, or because B is an accidental feature of A and A has being, or because A has being and B, of which it is itself predicated, is an accidental feature of it. Okay, so he's laying out two different things here. Um, Basically explaining how do I put it? How things have being either in relation to themselves, relation, or as a result of something. So to bring it back to the musical guy, like A is said to be B. This is either because A and B are features of the same thing that has being, so that would be the builder and being a builder and being a musician as accidental features of the particular man who is both a builder and a musician, or because B is a feature of A and A has being, musicality as a feature of the man and the man has being, musicality doesn't really exist, or because A has being and B, of which is itself predicated, is an accidental feature of it. So that would be that, your eye exists and B is and your vision is an accidental feature of your eye. So your vision, you have vision, quote unquote, because vision is a predicated accidental feature of your eyes. I guess that's probably as best as I can explain it. As for per se being, those are things that are said to have it, which are revealed by the patterns of predication. There are as many ways of indicating being as there are fundamental ways of saying something. And since some predicates indicate that what it is, some a quality, some a quantity, some a relation, some action or affection, some location, and some time, for each of these being indicates the same thing. There's no difference between saying that a man is getting better and that a man gets better, or between saying that a man is walking or cutting and walks or cuts, and so on. Another use of being is and is to say that something is true, and another of use of not being is to say that something is not true, but false. Similarly, for both assertion and denial, for instance, to assert that Socrates is musical is to assert that it is true that Socrates is musical, and to assert that Socrates is not white is to assert that it is true that Socrates is not white. Conversely, to assert that the diagonal is not commensurable is to assert that it is false that the diagonal is commensurable. Because this is the thing, and on this definition, I will say this: the way I would define truth, which isn't how he defines it, um, is that which is in accordance with reality. I think in here it's defined as something like truth is when the thing that is, or when the thing that is said to be not is not. And when something's false, it's when something that is said to be is not, and when something is said to be is not, it is. That's his definition. Mine would be that which is in accordance with reality. So that means that if something does not exist, right? In a way, in a strange way, you can almost be saying that it's false. To say that something is not real in a way is to say that the thing is false. So yeah, it's kind of like a weird thing to think about, but to think that okay, well, you know, I'm not a dragon, right? While it's because it is false to say that I am a dragon. I guess I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know. But in reality, I'm not a dragon. You get what I mean? I don't know. Being and that which is indicate both A, what is potentially, and B, what is actually. Among the cases that we have reviewed, for we say that for we say both that what potentiality and that what actually sees is seeing. And in the same vein, we say both that what can use its knowledge is knowledgeable, and what is actually using it. And we say that both what is already in stasis and what can be in stasis is in stasis. And it is the same with substances. We say that Hermes is in the stone, and that the half line is in the line. And we say that corn is corn, even when it is not ripe. It is, of course, a quite different question when something is and when it is not yet potential. So I guess what he's making a distinction here, what distinction he is making here is between something not fully or actually coming into existence but still coming into existence versus when something is in existence, potentially in existence. So, a seed is not a tree. what's potentially a tree, I guess. I don't know. Substance. The simple bodies, examples earth, fire, water, etc. Also bodies more generally and the compounds of them, animals, divinities, and their parts. All these things are said to be substance because far from their being predicated from such object, the other things are predicated in them. I'm going to say this, by the way, one of the things I always love about reading Greek stuff, Greek philosophy or things in this time, is that, and something I've enjoyed about Aristotle, is you always forget, like, how far natural philosophy science has come, you know? Like the whole thing where like metal is actually water because when you heat it up, it becomes a liquid. It's like that is a very weird way to think. Um, and the idea that like fire, earth, and water are like the simple, basic, you know, things is sort of funny when you think about it now in the 21st century. In another way, something which being intrinsic to one of the sort of that things that are not predicated of another is the cause of being for it, as the soul is for the animal. The intrinsic parts of such things which delimit them and indicate their thisness, parts on the elimination of which the whole is eliminated. So here it's just substance is something intrinsic to the thing as the soul is to the animal. And this is the intrinsic parts of a thing. As the body is eliminated by the elimination of the plane on some views and the plane by elimination of the line. More is generally some hold that number is like this. The claim that if it is eliminated, then nothing has being. Okay, I guess what he's saying here is something is intrinsic and indicates the substance of a thing when if you were to eliminate that part, you eliminate the whole. So, um, for example, being alive, right, is an intrinsic part of being a human being, and when you get rid of life, you become not a human being, but a corpse, or a cadaver, or whatever. At that point, you stop being a human, therefore you could say that life is an intrinsic part, or a substantial part of being human, being alive. That what it was to be a thing whose account is a definition is also said to be the substance of the particular. Yeah. And this one's just saying the essence or definition is substance. The upshot is that there are two ways of giving an account of substance, as the ultimate subject which is never predicated of something else, and something which is a this something and is also separable, and the shape or form of the particular is like this. Identity. Accidental identity. Examples, whiteness and musicality are the same because they are accidental features of the same thing. And man and musicality are the same because the latter is an accidental feature of the former. Also, um, also the musical is a man because it is an accidental feature of the man. So, okay, he thinks that the musical, in quotations, is a man. Each of the two simples is the same as the combination vice versa. The man and the musical are both said to be the same as the musical man, and the musical man is said to be the same as they. So in this case, what he's saying is identity can be the accidents of a thing. So how you identify it is via the accidents of the thing in question. That indeed is why there is no universal assertion of these identities. It is not, of course, true to say that every man is the same thing as the musical. This is because universals pertain per se, whereas accidentals do not. In the case of particulars, however, the assertion is made simpliciter. Socrates and musical Socrates are indeed held to be the same thing, and since Socrates is not predicable of a plurality of subjects, we do not speak of all Socrateses as we do speak of all men. Per se identity. There are many cases of this, as there are of per se unity. Those things are said to be the same whose matter is either formally or numerically one. Those things whose substance is one, so that it is clear that identity is a kind of unity of being, either for a plurality or of a single treated as a plurality, as in the case of where we say that something is the same as itself and thereby treat it as two. As for otherness, things are said to have it in their forms. Matter or substantial account are not one. In general, the accounts of otherness are correspondingly opposed to that of identity. Difference. Things that are other while being the same something, and not only numerically, but either formally or generically or by analogy. That's definition 1. Definition 2. Things of which the genus is other, also contraries, and things having otherness in their substance. And things are said to be similar if they have the same affections in every respect, also if they have more identical than other affections. Also things whose quality is one, and so one thing having more or more fundamental affections identical than other with something else, of those affections from among the contraries, in regard to which things undergo alteration. And cases of dissimilarity are correspondingly opposed to those of similarity. Opposite. Contradiction, contraries, relational terms, privation and condition, and the endpoints from which to which cases of production and destruction occur. Also features that cannot be simultaneously present in something that can have them both. These are said to be opposites, either themselves or their counterparts. Grey, for instance, and white are not found pertaining simultaneously to the same thing, and this is because their components are opposites. Yeah, I mean, you don't really need more than that because it's pretty clear. No more coffee. Sad. But yeah, like, basically if something's contradictory. Contrary. Here we go. Look at this. This is a bigger one. Things differing in genus which cannot simultaneously pertain to the same thing. The most widely differentiated things in the same genus. The most widely differentiated features pertaining to the same recipient. The most widely differentiated items in the domain of the same faculty. Things which the difference is greater either simpliciter or generically or formally. And other things are said to be contrary. Do you know, I will say this, just with you know, in the introduction written by the guy who translated this, he points out that this book may be notes or may have been written by multiple people. And this section is like really starting to make me think that, because this looks like a set of definitions, and then this looks like someone's tagged on a paragraph, someone else has tagged on a paragraph to say their own 2 cents on the topic. I don't know. In some cases because they possess such items as the above, in some cases because they are receptive of them, in some cases because they are productive of or affected by them, or are in the course of producing or being affected by them, or are connected with such things either as losses of them, or as early acquisitions, or as conditions or privations of them, and, of course, since there are a plurality of accounts of one and of being, it must be the case that the other things whose accounts are related to them, including the same, the other, and the contrary, have an otherness corresponding to each category. Formally other. Okay. Things are said, things in the same genus do not subordinate one to another, and things in the same genus with a differentiation, and things with a contrariety in their substance. Contraries are also other than each other within a form, either all of them or those whose account is primary, and also those things whose account in the lowest form of the kind are other. For example, man and horse are indivisible in kind, yet their accounts are other, and things having being in the same substance, but of also possessed of a differentiation, and the accounts of the formerly the same are ranged correspondingly against these. So the point here is to make a distinction between something that is different or other in the sense of like being contrary versus things that are part of a whole or part of a greater substance or oneness, but share a indivisible different substance. So, as an example, um, a formally other might be something like your body is one, your one being, but your leg, which is you, and your hand, which is you, are part of the one being that is different. Therefore, while it's the same substance, there's also a differentiation. So your hand is formally other to your leg, but it's your hand is you and your leg is you. I think that's what he's getting at with this formally other thing. Oh my god. This is a definition? How? How is that a definition? Okay, let's go. On the prior and posterior. On the assumption that there is some primary item and principle in each genus, certain things, by dint of their being more proximate to some principle, as defined either simpliciter and by its nature, or with relation to something, or in some location, or by some particular group. For instance, some things are prior in place by being nearer either to some place defined in nature, such as the midpoint or the extreme, or to an arbitrary point, and what is further removed is posterior. Others are prior in time by being, in some cases, further removed from the present time, as with past events, the Trojan War, thus being prior to the Persian War, as being further removed from the present, and in others by being nearer to the present, as with future events. The Nemean games are prior to the Pythian games as being nearer to the present, which we take to be the principal and primary item. Other things are prior in process, in that what is nearer to the primary source of process is prior. A child is prior to a man. The primary source of process, by the way, is a principle simpliciter. Just going to double check simpliciter unconditionally. Simply without qualification. Other things are prior in respect of potentiality. Whatever has an excess of potentiality is thus more potent, is prior. Such being, whatever it is, with those with whose choice it is necessary for the other posterior thing to comply, so that whether the posterior thing does or does not undergo the process depends on whether the prior thing initiates it, with the choice here being the principle. So in this case, the how would I put it? You could say that your hand, the motion of your hand, is in some way posterior to your thoughts because you have to think about moving your hand before your hand moves, making your mind prior and your hand posterior, I guess. Still, other things are prior in arrangements, such things that is as arranged relative to some defined item in accordance with some prescription. Examples: the second chorus member is prior in this way to the third, and the second lowest string is prior to the lowest, the principle being, in the former case, the chorus leader, and in the latter, the middle string. Also, in a different way, cognitively prior, treated as being also prior simpliciter. Among such things, those that are prior in account are so on another basis from those that are perceptively prior. For in account it is universals that are prior, whereas it is particulars that are perceptibly prior. In account too, the accident is prior to the whole. For instance, the musical is prior to the musical man. In the whole, account will not have being without the part, for that is not possible for musicality to have being without there being someone who is musical. Affections of prior things, example, straightness is prior to smoothness, since the former is a per se affection of a line, the latter of a surface. Also prior and posterior by nature and substance, viz. Prior things that can have being without posterior things, without the posterior being able to have being without the prior, to adopt Plato's distinction. So that would be a parent is sort of prior to a child. A parent is prior to a child because a parent can exist as a being, you know, without the child existing, whereas the child must necessarily can only necessarily exist when the parent exists, when the parents exist. Given the ability of accounts of being, it is primarily the subject and hence the substance that is prior, and thereafter things are prior in different ways in respect of potentiality and of entelechy. It's been a long time. Realization of potential. That's a good word. I like that word. Damn, I've only been going for an hour. We've got potentiality, quantity, and a few others. It's like 190 is when this ends, right? Never mind. It is 200. Ooh. Where was I? Relation, quality, quantity, potential. Here we go, I was still in prior. Some things, that is to say, are prior in potentiality, others in entelechy. For instance, the half line is potentially prior to the whole line, the part to the whole, and the matter of something to its substance, whereas in entelechy they are posterior, that in that only on the breaking of the connection will they have being in entelechy, so that in a way all things are said to be prior and posterior, are said so to be on the basis of this last account, given that some things can have being without others in respect of production, as the whole without its parts, others in respect of destruction, as the part without the whole, and this carries over to all cases. Potentiality. The principle of process and change either in another thing or in the same thing qua other. The art, for instance, the principle of process and change. The art, for instance, of building is not present in what is built, whereas with the art of medicine it may, since it is a potentiality, be present in the person being healed, but not qua the person being healed. So it's the principle of process and change that will cause the change, I guess. So what is a principle of change or process in this way is said to be potentiality, whether in something else or in the thing itself qua something else. I might be lazy again. I know I've only been going for an hour, but I'm going to be lazy again, I've decided, and I'm going to stop it there. I'm sorry that this has only been 1 hour. For those who wanted longer, I apologize. But I think, 10 pages to like the next stream, I'll smash it out. We'll be done with book Delta, and we'll be on to what's the next book? Epsilon, which will be hype, because I don't know what Epsilon has in store for us. Well, anyway, that's all. Um, I am Sinner. Thank you for watching. If you've watched all the way through, or if you've, I don't know if anyone's watched the stream. Let's have a look. Nope, but that's okay. Usually I get a few views after the fact. If you've watched it this far, I thank you, and I will see you in the next one.